the business part.
It's preparing. Give me just a moment here. Okay, we're in.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Again, thank you so much for joining us for this, our last meeting of the HIV Medication Access Work Group. I am Manny Santiago. I use any pronouns, and I have the honor of serving the people of Washington as the director of the Washington State LGBTQ Commission. As I said, this is the last meeting of this group, and we want to make sure that we have the opportunity to engage with stakeholders and excuse me, get your thoughts, your ideas, your corrections on the draft of the blueprint that we are presenting to, well, the work group is presenting to the commission for a final for a final report to the legislature. We'll talk about the process and what comes next in a minute, but for now, I want to share with you, excuse me, the line acknowledgement that the LGBTQ Commission has for our meetings, recognizing that even though I do have Indigenous background, I do not claim Indigenous culture or identity. And with that disclosure and disclaimer, I share with you the line acknowledgement for the LGBTQ Commission. Excuse me. The Washington State LGBTQ Commission recognizes that we live and work in stolen lands. These lands, water, mountains, skies, and everything within them have been inhabited since time immemorial by the descendants of the 29 federally recognized tribes, as well as the many not recognized tribal communities in the state of Washington. We recognize the history of colonization, genocide, subjugation, and enslavement experienced by Indigenous peoples in these lands and throughout the continent. It is our commitment as a state agency to recognize tribal sovereignty, to work alongside tribal partners for the well-being of our communities, to celebrate the achievements of many Indigenous communities among us, and to dismantle the ongoing legacy of settled colonialism, as well as the exclusion and erasure of Indigenous peoples that continues today, and may be so. And now, Tracy, if you share with us the housekeeping and guidelines for engagement.
Okay, good morning. My name is Tracy Carlos. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the program manager for the commission. I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you today, and I will be here to help with any tech issues in chat or if you need them. So some quick housekeeping. We'll be recording this meeting on YouTube live. We do not have an ASL interpreter available. However, a closed captioning feature has been enabled. It's not perfect, but it's the best we have at the moment. Make sure to keep the conversation on topic. In order to foster healthy and safe interaction, if there is any disruptive behavior, the participant in question will be notified by the commission staff about their behavior. If they refuse to comply with healthy and safe interaction guidelines, they will be banned from participating. Healthy and safe interactions includes assume positive intent on the part of the moderators, participants, and staff. Do not use transphobic, homo, lesbo, biphobic language, misogynist, xenophobic, racist, anti-Black, ableist, ageist, or foul language during your interaction. Focus your comments on policy matters, and name calling or insults are not allowed. And just to add for your own information, chat is publicly disclosable, so anything you put in there is also recorded. Thank you.
Martha.
Welcome, everyone. And in just a moment, we'll go to the substance of the meeting today. And I believe we have a few people who may be at least new to me. My apologies for not knowing all of you. Given that we're not all able to have our affiliation in the comments, maybe we could quickly say our name, our preferred pronouns, and our affiliation. I'm Martha Bean. I'm co-facilitating this group. I'm she, her are my pronouns. Manny, you've introduced yourself, as have you, Tracy. Eric.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Eric Seelback, she and her pronouns. Currently executive director at PCAF, Pierce County AIDS Foundation, for one more week.
Okay. Renee.
I am Renee McCoy. I'm a co-facilitator. I use she, her pronouns.
And Dale.
Good morning, everybody. Dale Brees, HIV positive individual living within Washington State.
And your preferred pronouns are?
He, his.
Thank you. Stephen, I'm new to you. Welcome to our meeting. Is it possible for you to unmute while you're driving? Oh.
Yes. Stephen Sawyer, he, him pronouns, executive director of POCAN and part of the LGBTQ Commission.
Wonderful. Carrie.
Good morning.
Just checking to see if Carrie from, sorry, which Carrie?
Sorry, Carrie Comer.
Good morning, everyone. Carrie Comer, Washington State Department of Health, Office of Infectious Disease, Business Development Coordinator.
Melanie Smith, welcome. I thought you couldn't be with us today. I'm glad you're going to be here.
I will be here for the first bit and then in and out for a while. My apologies. I have another conflicting meeting. I'm Melanie Smith, contract lobbyist, Cascade AIDS Project, she, her.
Jonathan.
Jonathan Froxwijk with Cascade AIDS Project, he, him pronouns.
Carrie Morris.
Hi, thanks. Carrie Morris, contract lobbyist, so she, her. Here today with Equal Rights Washington, and I, like Melanie, will be jumping in and out between several meetings, so thank you for holding it.
Kristen.
Kristen Jaden, VEED Healthcare Government Relations, she, her pronouns.
Okay, and Donna, oh, you know what? My screen has moved everyone around, so I'm not being systematic anymore. Let's see. Please just speak if we haven't heard from you yet.
Hi, Martha. This is Donna Sullivan, Chief Pharmacy Officer at Washington Healthcare Authority. She, her pronouns.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Hello, this is Sharisa Fatino, she, her pronouns. I'm the Acting Medicaid Director for the State Healthcare Authority.
Good morning, Dylan Connor Green, contract lobbyist, Gilead Sciences.
Good morning, Christina Hermack, in-house Gilead State Government Affairs, she, her pronouns.
Okay, I'm going to say one more quick thing and then we'll send it to Manny. Again, thank you so much for being here today, because this is the last meeting. And thank you so much to those of you who've had a chance to really read through that report. We've gotten some excellent substantive comments and look forward to both hearing more of those, doing an update of the report, because as you know, the authorship is myself and the facilitation team. And if it doesn't adequately convey what we've done in this work group, then it needs to be changed. So appreciate what you've offered to us so far and looking forward to more of that. Not wordsmithing, but just the substance. And with that, I'm going to give it to Manny.
Thank you, Martha. We have been going during every meeting and sharing some of the facts, some of the things that we have found out throughout the meetings and throughout the conversations. So I want to summarize some of the last things that we noticed, some of the things that have come up that are important for us as the facilitators to keep in mind as we engage in the conversation. And with that, I also want to say that, excuse me, in addition to these meetings, these public meetings with all the stakeholders together, or the majority of stakeholders together, we have also held several conversations, one-on-one conversations, as well as group conversations with other different groups, from pharmaceuticals to the state agencies that are part of these conversations, with as well as with people living with HIV, as well as service organizations. And our very last meeting is going to be tomorrow with another meeting with healthcare providers. So I wanted to make sure that people understood that the work of the work group is to bring all the voices together for sure, but we have also been reaching out to individual groups of each one of the stakeholders to make sure that all the voices are integrated. That doesn't mean that we have reached out to every single person that we could have. That is, one of the challenges of doing this sort of work with limited resources, but we have done as much as we are able to do to reach out to as many people as possible. In addition to that, we also have the feedback of the two commissioners who are experts in HIV service, Commissioner Maroon in Walla Walla, as well as Commissioner Sawyer, who's here with us today and continues being a commissioner and continue having input in the work that we do. So I wanted to make sure that people understood that this is not the only place where we have gotten feedback, and this is not the only place where we have gotten information and comments. We have also received written comments from stakeholders who have not been able to attend the meeting. So with that, some of the final things that I want to share with you that we have heard and found out, and most of them have to do with clarification. So throughout the work of this work group and the interviews and the conversations with the community at large, we have we have clarified some things to some extent, and those clarifications have come from how the setting of the prices for drugs is conducted, and who has the authority to do that. I think that was one of the biggest, issues that we run into, that we couldn't quite figure out how those prices were set. And it was great to hear what laws and guidelines apply to those conversations, and that the conversation happens at the federal government, at the federal government level, and it's not a local jurisdiction matter. It's a federal matter. So we clarified that. We also clarified some of the changes that have been made to the preferred drug list and how it's approached by HCA, and that's something that we'll hear a little bit more about today, because those comments came as a result to the request that we sent out, that we ask you to offer feedback to the draft report that we put together, and we received some feedback clarifying how some changes have been made to the preferred drug list and the process itself. So again, we'll go more into detail later on. We have also learned about some of the additional challenges that are facing people with living with HIV that have nothing to do with the formulary necessarily, or with access to services or the drugs, but actually compound things, compound realities that make it difficult for people with all the intention to have adherence, with all the intention to be in treatment, but make it difficult for them for a variety of reasons. And you can see some of those reasons and some of those communities that have more challenges described and actually named in the report that we presented to you for consideration. We also heard from healthcare providers and how they approach some of the challenges differently. And for some of them, it's absolutely fine to use the current system because it makes sense for them, because they have the staff, because they understand the process and have no problem whatsoever. They have a good rapport with their clients and their patients, and it's been wonderful. While others don't have the resources, don't necessarily have the rapport, or serve specific communities that have additional challenges accessing and navigating the current system. So that's something that was important for us to hear, that not every healthcare provider has had the same experience with the current system. So that's another fact that we learned that was really, really good to hear from healthcare providers. And then finally, we also heard a little bit about the clarifying the rebates system and how it works. It's still a little bit mysterious to some extent because of the nuance and because of the difficulties of each one of the pharmaceuticals having a different system and having a different contract and having a different approach to it. But it was good to know the basics on how rebates work, which is an important aspect of the things that we were tasked with exploring and doing. So those were some of the major facts that we learned throughout these conversations. And I think that it's been really great to hear where everybody is and what the issues are and how different communities and different stakeholders have had a different experience of these of the current system and the current processes. So again, these are not things that are going to change. These are just things that we have noticed and we have learned throughout the conversations, and that are going to certainly help us articulate the recommendations that we present to the legislature for consideration. So with that, Renee will be sharing with you a summary of some of the things that we heard from the community on our last town hall.
Sorry. The purpose of the town hall meetings was essentially to have a conversation that was kind of just sort of informal and sort of figure out what people were feeling and how people, and to frame the conversation in real life situations. Some of the things that we looked at in both of the town hall meetings was trying to identify who was missing and what were the challenges that we were faced with in providing healthcare and providing medication to persons with HIV who were also dealing with HIV. Some of the groups that were identified were the undocumented persons and people who really didn't qualify for Medicaid, but they were still, it was still important to include them as folks who need medication and who were having problems with access. The other were homeless people and people who were unstably housed. Some of the challenges, one of the challenges that was identified and talked about was transportation, and how it was extremely difficult for people to get out to get medication, and that was something to deal with. Another group that was identified were transgender persons, and the health concerns of transgender persons was very complicated and very complex, and certainly played a significant role in how they were able to access medications, and persons who were dealing with mental health issues. Again, that was not, these are not, that's not all. Some of the recommendations that we got, certainly in the first town hall meeting, were that efforts should be made to make access easier, and that we should increase our efforts to educate patients about what's going on. Cultural sensitivity remained a big issue throughout, and the role of poverty in and the importance of recognizing that this was an issue of access to just regular research that individuals need. It was important in a town hall meeting that we reduce, that we approach the barriers by reducing the barriers. And so some of the recommendations that also included that we reduce the requirements of care providers when it comes down to prescribing medications, that we increase cultural sensitivity, and that we consider not just the cost of medication, but the overall cost of healthcare, rather than looking at just the cost of medication. It was also important to people in the town hall meetings that we realized that people receiving diagnoses of HIV for the first time, or very late in the progression of the disease, are at risk for a number of health problems, and that we recognize the complexity of their whole healthcare agenda and all of the ancillary health conditions that might be making their access to medication difficult. It was important that we identify who are the most vulnerable and that we be aggressive in reaching out to those persons in order to better identify and address the overall complications that we were having. One of the things that people agreed about was that we really needed to uncomplicate processes to care, uncomplicate processes to receiving the kinds of support and the kinds of help in people's life that really didn't have anything directly to do with HIV, but certainly made their access to HIV medications more important. What people identified mostly are what we call those social determinants of care and of health, that we begin to really look at to continue to visit what the social determinants of health are and not avoid that we find a way to include persons with HIV. And that was a struggle in this, but that we continue to look for ways of including persons with HIV and persons who provide care in making decisions about Medicaid access. The bottom line was that everybody throughout the town hall meetings agreed that those who are underserved already will continue to suffer if we don't do anything, and that it was agreed upon that persons who are living with HIV will continue to experience low self-esteem and substandard quality of life and quality of health, and that this is important. It was also important for us to, I think, on the team, to point out that this is a dynamic process. This is not one that ends today, but one that will continue on. And this is just the beginning, even whether this group continues or not, that we are responsible for the awarenesses that we have made, and that our knowledge of this continues to engage us in the work of making access to medication available, regardless of the fact that most people with HIV get healthcare. It's those that are not that continue to be important. The bottom line is that medication challenges for persons living with HIV who receive Medicaid are dealing with issues of social justice, and those issues of social justice have far-reaching implications for all of us. Okay.
Thank you, Renee, as always. Quick agenda review. And I'm going to begin with something that I think underscores some stuff that some words that Manny said earlier, and that Renee just emphasized as well. This is the last meeting. It's not the end of the process. Manny, as the executive director of the LGBTQ Commission, will take a look at what the report is after we revise it yet again, and make recommendations to the commission. The commission will make recommendations to the legislature, and the legislature may or may not choose to act on them. And should the legislature start their own process, there will be other public input opportunities there. So this is not the end, and I know some of us who've been involved in Washington state process stuff for decades, like myself, it's like, oh my gosh, is this stuff ever end? But yes, there will be this product that your facilitation team will write that we hope is as accurate as possible a view of the richness of what you have offered as Manny and the commission do their thinking in accordance with the budget proviso they were given. So just underscoring that context for you. A very pointed part of that context is that if you have specific written feedback you want us to have, in particular if it's wordsmithing or something's really overtly wrong, and there have been a few of those things, please send them to us by close of business Pacific time on Wednesday. And you can send them to any of the four of us, ideally all four of us, but just send them to us, and we will be updating through the end of this week, because Manny's responsibility to his commission is November 1st. So that's coming right up. So what we'll do today is we'll take a look at the report. I'll begin with just a quick overview of it, because I'm not going to, sometimes I ask people, say, how many of you have had a chance to read the report? I'm not going to embarrass you and ask you to do that. But the reality is we can't all read everything these days. So I'm going to give a very quick overview. Then we're going to have a full discussion. And I'm going to, while I'm talking, please think about this question. It's in the agenda. What would you like the LGBTQ Commission to keep topmost as they make their recommendations to the legislature? So we're going to really ask you for the best nuggets. And I'm going to do the facilitator thing, which I haven't done too much in this particular work group, which we'll do a round robin on it. And I have a way of keeping track, so I don't do like what I did with our names earlier. So we'll just get each of you an opportunity to say what you want kept topmost. And then depending on how things go, this is a goosier meeting than some of our others have been. We'll have a free discussion. We might break into small groups. We'll definitely take a break. I'll take a break when it seems like the group needs one, as opposed to scheduling it. Manny may have an opportunity to tell you how he's been cogitating on this over the last many weeks, because as you can imagine, it's not just going in and staying in one place. Manny's the kind of guy who thinks all the time. So if he's ready, there may be an opportunity. He may want to take that opportunity to say whatever he might have been thinking about thus far. Any questions about how we run the meeting today? Okay, so let me ask a quick question. Donna and your other colleagues at the HCA, when do you first need to leave?
I'll be able to stay, Martha. This is Donna.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, that's wonderful. Okay, so the report, it begins with a summary that begins with the budget proviso and talks about how the commission chose to, Manny chose to implement the requirements of the budget proviso. Then as a part of that summary, this is page 2, it's see, I need to fix page numbers. Anyway, the issues that we understand to have been identified as a part of this work are categorized according to the 3 topics that the legislature asked Manny and the commission to look at. That's a table on page 3. And I don't know how deep that watermark is, but I just want to point out the watermark all across it is this is for review. More about this report is on page 4, including authorship. Some of you who've, again, like myself, been involved in Washington state processes for many decades know that sometimes these reports are consensus reports from the group. In my experience, that takes about a year to do something like this. So what this is instead is your facilitation team's best attempt to convey the broad array of what was heard. There's a chronology here. We think we're going to expand that a little bit with a diagram so that people who come in cold to this can have a quick visual of how things have worked. The page 5 begins, then there's more about how the report was set up and how the work group was set up, and the aspirations we had for the work group. The issues and options. we began section 3 deciding we were just going to tell it like we felt we saw it, which was that there were competing frames for how these issues and problems were understood. We thought this might generate some buzz, and it has. So we will be updating this, but I think it's still fair to say that that there were competing, and there will likely remain competing frames for how to understand this problem. There may be more than 2. And as some of you who've been with us since the start know, that at the beginning, I said, for me personally, as a facilitator and mediator, I love seeing that competition of frames and ideas, because that's what generates newness. That's what generates options. And that's what you all have done for Manny and the commission. So I personally don't shy away from saying, boy, there is some differences here. That's where the richness comes. Good morning, Scott. Welcome. So issues and options versus recommendations. The group, the facilitation team chose not to say that we were going to offer recommendations, because that isn't our place. Again, had we had maybe a year to do a consensus report, maybe there could have been consensus recommendations. Instead, we've tried to catalog as succinctly, but again with as much meat as possible, what some options are for addressing the issues that have been identified. And again, we identified 6. And if you've had, I'm not going to go through those 6 issues other than to say they're there for you to look at, and we will we'll start working through it. Let me just give a quick pause. Your facilitation team has been talking quite a lot, the half hour. So let me just give a quick pause. Are there any questions about today's process, or the process from here to November 1st, or any great amount of concern or heartburn about our suggestion for how we complete today's meeting? Please speak up. We're a small enough group, you can just speak up if you need to.
Martha, I'm just curious, are you going to share like a brief overview of feedback you've already received on this? Oh, let me turn up my volume. I'm sorry.
No, I think the volume was fine. It just cut out. I'm sorry.
Sometimes Zoom changes my volume without me asking it to. My question is, are you going to give a brief summary of the feedback you've received already on this? I think that would be helpful in helping us use our limited time. For example, if you've gotten a piece of feedback and I'm like, yeah, that's what I was going to say, then I don't necessarily need to say it. But
perfect. And I think it's possible, Manny, you may be the best person to do that. Is that okay? Do you mind doing that, Manny?
Yes, and I think that it will be a combination, because right now.
And let me interrupt Manny for just a moment by saying, yes, we've not received gobs of feedback.
No.
I mean, I have to say, when I first put this out, 3 weeks ago, I was really hoping you all would say, oh my God, I can't wait to read that dry, droll report and give lots of feedback. We haven't really gotten feedback until, shall I say, very recently. So we've not gotten gobs. Manny, I'll be quiet.
So yeah, I was just going to expand on that because the feedback that we received was correcting some factual errors on how we presented some of the facts that we have collected. We can do it quite openly, and I'm sure that the people who submitted those corrections will be able to correct any misinterpretation of the comments that they put. But I see that Dale has his hand up.
Yeah, just reviewing, because I have a subject matter has came up that we have not included yet, that for consideration, and where would be the chance? Should that be just oral feedback, or later on today, or exactly how?
So I would suggest that we're going to be taking very careful notes today. But if you want to make sure that it really gets in there, or you're not sure, given how the discussion went, that it went as well as it should, that you send us an email. It doesn't have to be within the context of the report. You can just send an email, don't forget about, or whatever. But that's exactly the kind of thing we want. Dale, thank you so much for bringing up the how. And we're hoping, we get through a circle of everyone saying what should be kept topmost, and at least 2 or 3 times. So other thoughts on process or feedback given? Okay, well, let's get started then. And I would like to, we have 2 other people who've joined us, Scott and Howard. Earlier today, we had the opportunity to say who we are, our preferred pronouns, and our affiliation. Might you do that for us, Scott and Howard?
Yeah, sure. This is Scott Bertani with Health HIV, and he and him and his.
And Howard, welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Howard Russell from, where am I from? From AHL, AIDS Health Foundation. My pronouns are he, him, and whatever happens that day.
Great. Donna, you have your hand up, which suggests to me maybe either you want to kick us off on what you want to have kept topmost, or you have something about process. So go ahead.
No, I had a question about, is the report going to be sent out again to this work group before it gets finalized and sent to the legislature?
No, you're going to have to trust us.
Okay.
So that's
I'm a
why
little
we've
concerned about feedback being provided to you without it going to the group to see before we, that gets put into the report before we get to see the final product.
What I would like to do, Donna, is when we take a break, let me get together with the facilitation team and see what we can do to accommodate that. It may mean, if you want to take another look at it, it has to be on Halloween. So, I appreciate that. Knowing that the timing was tight is part of why we put the authorship paragraph in there, so that if in the end something is really crazed and we didn't get it right, you can point to that and say, well, that was Martha. I'm here. But yeah,
and
thank
Martha,
you.
can I say something? And it's that we would not put anything on the final report to a legislature that is not part of this draft. So the draft with what we're working on today, the draft that the facilitators group put together, all the points that are there with the feedback that you present today, all of those things will be what will be used to then transfer to the short report. And this draft, this document that we have created together, along with all the documents and the appendixes that are on the website, which includes written comments from agencies and from people living with HIV, from doctors and all of that will be presented with the final report. So nothing will be on the final report that you have not seen, because all the points that are going to be presented are going to be direct quotes from what we have on the draft of the blueprint today. So don't think that we're using this and then rewriting something to present to the legislature. No, we're collecting all of the ideas here. And as the commission looks into, these are some of the recommendations, or these are things that are not going to be solved by legislature or by anything. All of that is what is going to be copied into the report that is going to be on top of all the working materials that we have used. So, and with that, if there is a desire to see the final report, I will make sure that we have at least the weekend before I send this out to the legislature on Monday afternoon. So, yeah. And also, just in a process issue, that once that the report is on the hands of the legislature, all of us had the opportunity and the possibility of sending your responses to the report to the committee. So once that this is presented to the legislature, I will send all of you on the mailing list that we have been, excuse me, using to send out the announcements and all that. I will send the final document that is sent to a legislature with contact information to the committees and the people that have received this on the legislature, so you have the opportunity to then respond if you so choose. Okay.
Okay, so let's get down to substance. And in keeping with the question that I offered up earlier, what is it that you would like the LGBTQ Commission to keep topmost as they make recommendations? And Jonathan, well, let's start with you.
Sure. I actually, sorry, before I offer that, okay, Manny just responded. So process-wise, when will the commission itself be reviewing and making a decision on I guess, adopting this report or no?
No. The commissioners that have been involved with these have the opportunity to give me any feedback. And there's another committee that is meeting on Thursday that might also want to give some feedback. But the whole commission cannot take votes unless it's an actual public meeting with quorum and things like that. So, and we don't have an instruction from the legislature to have to approve these by the commission before it's sent to a legislature. Yeah.
So I think it's good to think of this as input. The report is input.
Got it.
Yeah.
To answer your question, Martha, I feel like what I have is I did review the report, and I thought that this meeting was the venue for providing feedback. So apologies for not providing written feedback.
It's okay. It's okay.
I'm happy to provide the feedback that I have, but I'm wondering if it might make more sense, not to question your prompt, but to go section by section and see if folks have feedback, because otherwise I just feel like I have sort of input across the document and I don't want to talk for like 20 minutes.
Yeah, Jonathan, I appreciate that. And what I'd like to do is get through at least one time of people saying, gosh darn it, folks, don't forget this one big thing, or I'm going to stick with this for now, but we can go to a section by section after that. And okay. Jonathan, we're welcome to, do you want to offer that, or would you like me to come back to you later?
I will respond to your actual prompt and
Thank
offer.
you. Thank you for accommodating me.
I guess what well, this is a little bit of a cheat because it's responding versus the top thing. I feel like I've shared what I want the legislature to know topmost, but I think a frame of the entire report that that I would want the legislature to understand is currently the frame. It shows up in the lens, the two lenses that are presented at the beginning, and then it kind of echoes throughout the document. Is open access and the formulary versus other barriers to treatment. And to me, it's really important that the legislature know that that is a false dichotomy. I don't think anyone on this call would disagree that we want to dismantle every barrier to treatment for people living with HIV. And there really is no, there's no need to pit those against each other. So that to me is an important like framing device that appears throughout the report. And I would want the legislature to know that at least I as one work group participant don't think that that's a false dichotomy.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Christina.
Hi, everybody. I think Gilead would like to defer to the community here. We've been concerned about this access issue for 4 years, and we would want to point out just how long Washington has had the most restricted access for this category. It's been about 4 years now. So we defer to the.
Thank you. Carrie Morris, are you with us still? Yes, she's connecting to audio. Carrie, and now you're muted.
Carrie had to step out for a second, so
sure.
perhaps,
Teresa?
yeah.
I am not going to comment at this time. Thanks.
Okay. Melanie?
She's out too.
Okay.
And Carrie Morris is back, so if you want to
Carrie Morris, welcome back.
Yeah.
What would you like to have kept topmost as not hearing you, Carrie?
Yeah, I am sorry, I missed the last discussion, so just get me right now because I don't know how to catch up yet. So I'll follow.
Okay, but the
later.
question is for the next person. We'll say Scott. What would you like to be kept topmost as this information is passed on from the commission to the legislature? What's the topmost?
Sure. No, thank you. Thank you for allowing the opportunity. I would say that this is a health equity challenge for individuals. Certainly that they lead complex and challenging lives for individuals that are on state Medicaid programs, and it affects individuals living in geographic disparate places that are in secondary markets or urban markets or really rural geography places much more harder, in that there are additional challenges, not just access challenges to a formulary, but access challenges to providers. So the greater that there are limitations placed on individuals' access to approved treatments, it affects not just the individual themselves, but the communities that they come back to. And for a communicable disease, I think the health equity is the most important aspect.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
And one last is that this also affects individuals, not just persons who are living with HIV, but for those individuals that are at risk of HIV relative to PrEP. And I don't see as much in that document for individuals that are at risk. So it's cheaper for preventative medicine, clearly, and this affects individuals in that respect too.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Okay. Howard, are you ready to say what should be kept topmost?
Oh, I'm definitely not ready, but I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna go by. I was on the last town hall meeting, which was very, I thought was very well put together and a lot of discussion. And I'm gonna kind of go by what Jonathan said when he mentioned barriers to treatment, especially barriers to treatments among populations. So I think that's one of the things that stick out for me, basically.
Okay, so, okay. Mary Clogston.
Hello.
Hello.
My name's Mary Clogston. I am with the House Democratic Caucus, and I'm a policy analyst. I staff the healthcare committee, and I am an observer in this conversation, so I have no comment.
Okay. Eric.
Thank you. I have a couple points to raise. One, I want to really emphasize what Scott said, that this is an equity issue, and I would want that to be raised higher. So, for example, in the chart of issues of the 6, the equity piece is down at the bottom as number 5. And from my perspective, I would rather see that as number 1 and specifically called out as equity in those charts, because I think that's really a critical piece of this. The other comment is really about the framing of the frames. So you talk about the first and second frame and the 2 frames, and it feels important to me to acknowledge that what the frames are is a government system saying our system works and is fine, and the community and folks who are impacted by that system saying it's not working. And I don't really see that directly reflected in this or directly called out. And I just think that's an important piece for the legislature to hear. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Eric. Dale.
Yeah, good morning. I'm going to second what Jonathan said about the equal access, the dichotomy, and also what Scott said about the health equity. But larger, that has been not included, that I really want to frame is how the timing of this prior authorization process during the COVID pandemic it happened at the same time that we were writing new laws for the modernization of HIV within Washington State, which are now just coming to fruition. And we have not talked about that as a commission and in this report yet about how that is being finalized right now, and it's still a public health threat, HIV is, and that individuals that that are not in treatment might end up with a public health officer writing that, that they might need to be in treatment and such, and how this is cumbersome. That is not even addressed in prior authorization process. And so it makes me, me lean about how the timing was really, really bad because we haven't synced those two together yet. And that is about health equity. And so that modernization feedback loop is happening right now. November 20th is that last input needed, but it looks like a January 1, 2022 start is what it's looking like right now for the new laws, even though we've been covered since June 12th of 2020. Well, 2020, yeah. So anyway, that's my piece. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dale. Stephen. Is Stephen still with us? Yes. Would you like, you are the commission. Is there something you'd like?
I just echo, I think what many have said. I think it's a health equity issue. I think when we think about particularly the fail system, right? That fail pay system is really an issue, and it creates a lot of barriers for particularly low income and individuals who most need this medication, the individuals that we're most trying to reach. And it just creates those barriers. So I think, one, I do believe the equity issue should be risen to the top and really highlighted because that's really what we're talking about. We're failing a whole group of people with these issues.
Okay. Carrie Comer. Carrie Comer.
Good morning. Yeah, sorry, trying to find my mute button.
Yeah.
I think a couple things I would say for Department of Health is, one, we're committed to improving our linkage to care activities and efforts. I think that is a factor here that we have some responsibility over, and we'll be happy to take input and feedback on how to do a better job with that. And then two, I'll just put a reminder out that the antiviral drug class, both for HIV and Hep C, is evolving very quickly. So I think this conversation may not be done just through this process. I think we could have this conversation in 6 months and come with another set of recommendations, and 6 months after that and come with more. So, I think this is an evolving time, and it's an exciting time. We have a lot on the horizon, and I just want to put that out there, that we might come with some conclusion today or this month, but we might need to revisit in 6 months to take advantage of more biosimilars and generics and new modalities and other opportunities that are on the horizon. So, and I think it's important and exciting. So just keep that in mind. We don't want to get locked into something today with more to come. So hope.
Okay. Devin.
Oops, sorry. Same comments as Christina. ultimately, I think the best thing here is to defer to the community and listen to their voices. So.
Donna, you're back. Do you have something you'd like to have kept topmost?
Yeah, what I would just like to point out is that, the Healthcare Authority does support treating the HIV population. However, the primary beneficiaries of removing prior authorization from this drug class will be the drug companies. It's going to result in increased costs to Washington taxpayers, and it's going to have little to no impact on the health equity and the barriers that we're talking about. It's just one small piece of it, and removing the prior authorization is really, it's not going to help the community in the way that you, I think, believe it will.
Well, and there are many yous here and many perspectives.
Yeah, in a way that it's been discussed, and I see Sharisa has her hand up. So,
and Sharisa's had a chance to speak, so I'd like to go back to the two people who've not yet, which are Kristen, Carrie Morris, and Melanie.
Hi, Kristen Jaden, ViV Healthcare. And to Carrie Comer's point, there's a lot on the horizon, and ViV is very proud of the scientific advances we've had in bringing new medications to market. We need decision-making to be between the patient and the provider, and that's the best thing for someone's healthcare. So that would be what I say back. And when you don't, that's when disparities are driven, which is a major concern. So thank you very much.
Okay, Carrie Morris and Melanie, and then we'll go back to Charissa. Forgive me if I'm not saying your name properly, Charissa. So Carrie Morris and Melanie?
They're not here.
Okay, all right, thanks, Manny. I will make a special way of marking that on my list. Charissa?
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify, I'll lower my hand here, clarify a couple things. And one is that we do not in Washington Medicaid have a fail first policy. Right. Back from August 1st, 2020, that was eliminated. So there is no such thing as a fail first policy. That has been corrected. That's not the case. And the other thing I would like to say is I agree with the enthusiasm and looking forward to future medications. I just want to remind folks that there is a process in law, several processes in law that dictate to the Healthcare Authority and the state Medicaid program how we evaluate and approve drugs. That's through the Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee, and it's through our evaluation of the evidence and the literature, both of which are codified in law. So I just want to remind folks that there is a process, and we're legally bound to it. So it's not as if there's whimsy on our end, just saying, oh, we don't like that name. So just a reminder, there are things that we are required to do by law as we evaluate and consider whether or not new medications are equally effective and or less costly.
Okay, so I'm going to go back and reflect on some of the things that were said and ask for a few clarifications, and also some of the things that were said, it's not clear to me if and how they translate into something we would put in the report. So let me go back to my notes here. Jonathan, you said something that a couple of people said, here, I like that. And let me make sure I understood it correctly. You felt that the report suggested or framed that there was the open access and the formulary questions versus addressing other barriers. And I think what you were saying is you were making the assertion that pretty much everyone on this group you've heard say, we all believe other barriers should be reduced. Is that am I getting it right, Jonathan?
Yes, so far.
Yes. Okay. So what I'd love to do is test that a little bit. If I would be delighted to write that into the report. In fact, I actually wrote it earlier And someone pointed out to me that, you know, we actually didn't test the group for that. But I kind of thought I heard that everybody in this group would support finding ways to reduce barriers. I'm going to say other barriers, and we can define other in just a minute, but you know, transportation, the unhoused, those who suffer from other illnesses. The group has said over and many times, we all support ways to reduce other barriers to access to HIV meds. If anybody wants to challenge me on that, please do right now, because otherwise I'm probably going to integrate that into the report. It's kind of a mom and apple pie kind of thing, but yeah, okay. Now I see some puzzlement on some faces, like, what the heck is Martha doing here? Trying to tease out how to get to the nuggets here. Okay, second question. Scott, you noticed that there wasn't much in here about PrEP. And I think you're right. I think we can find ways to add some work back into that. Several of you used words that indicate there's a lens of equity, which is a way we phrased it a couple of different times because we heard that in the work group. And there are, I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly that when we say equal access and we say this is an equity issue, are we more or less talking about the same thing? Some of it now, and Eric, you had suggested that this is sufficiently important to you. This is such a topmost thing for you that you'd love to see that as issue number one. I would love you all to talk to me a little bit more about equal access, the equity lens. Tell me more about what that actually means, and just kind of raise your hand or go ahead and speak up. And Jonathan, I believe you have your hand raised, and so does Eric. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you. I think what folks were getting at, and I noted this in my review of the report, was it's not till issue 5 that the report talks about equity in more specific terms. It starts identifying that it just starts mentioning racial inequities, inequities affecting LGBTQ folks. And so I agree with what a number of people said about foregrounding that more. I think that's for people living with HIV and people serving people living with HIV, that's a foremost concern, is the disparate impacts. I also, even in issue 5 in the report, I don't feel that actually gets to the heart of what at least I want in the report, because I believe the language there is something like acknowledge and secure at the highest levels a policy, like an affirmation that HIV it disproportionately impacts particular groups. We already know that. We don't need anyone in Washington State to acknowledge that publicly. That is a long understood, extremely well documented phenomenon. What I think is needed, what I think the issue is that all evidence points to the fact that this policy in particular has a disproportionate impact on LGBTQ people, people of color, people with disabilities such as mental illness and substance use disorder. To me, that is the equity issue that legislators need to understand, is the equity impacts of this particular policy. We don't need to rehash the inequities of the HIV epidemic.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing you say is, Martha, that's kind of pablum to say, oh, let's acknowledge that this is an equity issue. It's like, come on, we all know that. What you're looking for is, it's an equity issue, and from your perspective, the equity issue is compounded by, you said this policy, and I assume when you say this policy, you mean the prior authorization system, Jonathan?
Yes.
Okay. Eric Scott.
I'll echo what Jonathan said and just add just a little tiny bit more, which is it's also the formulary issue. So it's not just the prior authorization, but it's the formulary. Because what's happening is a disparate system of access depending on whether or not, what kind of insurance somebody has access to. And so it's also a question of economics and socioeconomic status, right? And so if you are on Medicaid, then you have less access to medications than if you are insured through your employer or some other means. And so that, I think, is also a nugget there.
Okay, Scott, and then I want to go back to some things that Donna and Sharissa said and ask them some more as well.
Right. I would say the same thing that each of them has said. Equity is through the lens of individuals that are living at the fringes or the margins of society. And as individuals switch in and out of certain programs from Medicaid, and then they may make more, then they're granted through a Ryan White or AIDS drug assistance program access to medications that they wouldn't been on had they not been in those social determinants of health issues. So policies 121099, AB and AA, they affect individuals that are on the margins. And certainly, as Sharissa has said, it's not a fail first, but prior authorizations are in place of a fail first policy, and that it is one more systemic equity challenge that they must struggle to get through, not just be faced with economic circumstances, but now they have to face a governmental point of view that then requires them to jump through one more additional hoop. And we can call it fail first, or we can call it a prior authorization, but they still amount to the same equitable challenge. And I respect the cost containment aspect of it, however.
So Donna and Sharissa, and you had spoken about, Sharissa, you clarified it's not a fail first policy, it's a pre-authorization policy. And Donna, you said something that I will not be putting in the report. I will not be updating the report to say that if you remove prior authorization, the drug companies will be the primary beneficiaries. I might change how we talk about the role of pharma, but I wonder if you could say more, Donna, about what you think is the right way to offer up in this report the relationship that right now I'm hearing a 3-point relationship. The things that the speakers just now have said about equity, and the things that are true for your mandate, which are to manage costs, and the things that we've heard from our colleagues here who are affiliated with the pharmaceutical industry about the need to get more, their perceived need to get more and different drugs in front of people and new drugs, and the patient-physician relationship. I didn't frame that very well. But Donna, speak to me a little bit more about how what you said earlier could be said better in the report.
So with the Medicaid program, we are required by federal law to cover all medications where a manufacturer has entered into an agreement, a federal rebate agreement with the Department of Health and Human Services at the federal level. Our only leverage, we can then, so we get federal rebates. We can also try to get additional supplemental rebates from manufacturers, but really the only leverage we have in order to negotiate those additional discounts are placing drugs on a preferred drug list and placing drugs on prior authorization. So if you remove those tools, you remove our only leverage to request or try to negotiate discounts, and you remove any incentive for the manufacturer to provide those discounts because they don't voluntarily give us discounts or supplemental rebates on these medications. It wasn't until 2018 when we put the HIV class on the PDL that manufacturers started to, offer the TOPS program, which is a supplemental rebate pool, a rebate. Prior to us joining in 2018, there was only one drug that had a rebate, and it has long been generic. And now we have, probably 7 or 8 manufacturer drugs that have rebate offerings, but they're still not meaningful rebates, meaning that they are still much more expensive than what our preferred products are. So when we're looking at medical necessity, as Sharisa said, we're charged with providing care. We use evidence to determine equally effective products or therapies. And our medical necessity also requires that we look at less costly, equally effective alternatives. And so that is the process that we're doing. And when we, in order to kind of go through that process, prior authorization is one of the tools to establish medical necessity. We don't require any patient to change their HIV medication. Once they've started on it, they get to continue on it. That has never been part of our process. When patients meet, when they have a clinical reason for not being able to take a preferred product, they can request authorization with their provider. And we have established certain criteria that is based on particular potential risk of side effects, and then also socioeconomic status. If there is a person that is living on the fringes, that is a reason for them to get authorization. So it's not to, our policy is not to prevent people that really need those medications to get those medications, but it's really to.
Okay, Donna, thank you so much. And Teresa, I might note that I don't think there's anything in the report that reminds people that there is a system that you go through for approval of drugs.
You guys call it petition, I think. Our policy isn't well outlined and the process in order to receive, to go through and request authorization is not outlined in the report. You guys refer to it as petitioning.
And what's your preferred word for it?
Well, we request authorization.
Okay. All right. I want to make sure it's something that speaks to everybody. Okay, I'm going to do a quick time check here. It's 11:15, and Manny and Renee and Tracy and I need to take a look at our schedule so we can address the question of whether or not we'll be able to make a next version of the report available to you. And so we're going to take a probably just realistically a little bit more than a 10-minute break. And then when we come back, I'm going to poll you all quickly to see if we should keep with this kind of a conversation, if you want to try to use the final 45 minutes, because that's all it will be. So we need to leave time for wrap up to go through section by section, or if you think this conversation is richer. We'll do that as a quick poll, and then we'll proceed from there. So time for a quick break. Our facilitation team, I think we have our own little breakout room. So enjoy your next cup of coffee, and we'll see you again in a little more than 10 minutes. Thank you.
So what time do you want us back? Sorry.
Well, just before 11, a few minutes before 11.
Thank you.
And just a quick reminder that we are still broadcasting live, so be cautious with what you say on your mic. And the staff is going to retreat to a breakout session, so you won't see us, but you are still online on YouTube live. So keep that in mind as you go on to your breaks.
Thank you. Okay, folks, we're back. I would love it if people would show their videos, because that will tell me that, that we're ready to tell you what we've figured out about the schedule and about our weekends and about your weekend. Okay, Donna is back, she says, and everybody else is back too. Okay, waiting for a few more. Okay, let's go ahead and let you know what we've given the request. We would still welcome, we still welcome, not would still, we still welcome comments from any of you by close of business Wednesday. We're not going to wait until close of business Wednesday to start working on some of the substantive and important things that have been brought forward today. So we'll be starting the rewrite. But please do feel free to send us written comments on this version of the report up to close of business on Wednesday. Then Manny will work with that and provide to you, he's not able for sure to commit to Friday, but it might be Friday or Saturday, what he expects to recommend to the commission to then recommend to the legislature on, he will do that on Friday or Saturday. And then that happens on Monday the 1st. Manny, and Tracy, did I get that right?
Yeah, so the short report that we have to present to the legislature will be ready by Friday or Saturday, depending on my schedule. And I will share that with all the appendixes and all that with the mailing list that has been receiving this, with information on how to take all your comments, all of your responses to that, to the appropriate committees in the legislature. Okay, so keep that in mind, because the truth is that we don't have a whole lot of time to receive feedback from the work group to then rewrite any final report, but we still have, each one of us still has an opportunity to go to the appropriate committees that are going to receive this in the legislature, to add your comments, to add your response, even before they start any other action. So keep that in mind. We don't want to dismiss the concerns or to dismiss the ideas. We just have very limited time in how we present this. And as Carrie Comer said earlier, these are part of larger conversations that are going to keep expanding and that need to be revisited. So that actually helped me in frame this, because this is one piece of the whole project, the larger project, which is access to HIV medication for the people who need it. So keep that in mind.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to pose a process question to you all, and I'm going to ask you to actually, if you can, to turn on your screens. I'm not going to do the Zoom voting thing, just as soon as see you raise your hand. And the question will be, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you prefer this, to continue the discussion on what's topmost on your mind. What's topmost, what would you like the commission to keep topmost as they send their thoughts to the legislature, versus shall we try to use the next 40 minutes to go section by section, or actually I'm going to suggest issue by issue. Well, actually, anyway, to go more methodically through the report. So we'll start, if you are there and can turn on your video, that would be great for me, given that it's easier for me than asking people to vote. Thank you. And if you really can't do that, I guess we understand. Okay, if you would like to go section by section in the next 40 minutes, please raise your hand. Okay. If you would, okay, we've got two. Can I see it again? If you'd like to go section by section, Tracy, can you help me keep track of this? I'm not doing very well today. Okay, if you prefer this conversation about what to keep topmost as this information is sent on to the legislature, please raise your hand. Okay. So I think a lot of people don't have a preference. So, but the preference is to go section by section. And we're going to do this super fast on a couple of these sections. So keep your points as nuggets, please. The summary. Who has something to say about what should be done with the summary? That's section number 1, which right now is called page 2.
Martha,
Yes,
Eric
oh,
has.
Eric. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, before we jump into sections, I have a clarifying question. I can't remember if it was Teresa or Donna who said we no longer have a fail first policy. And I needed some clarification on that because my understanding was that the policy was changed from fail twice to fail once. And unless I missed something where that fail once got removed, I'm unclear. So I just wanted some clarification, please.
If you read our policy, there's no requirement that you've tried and failed any HIV medication. It's all about why you can't, why the regimens that are on prior authorization are met, why you have to take those particular drugs rather than the ones that are preferred on the preferred drug list.
So Donna, if forgive me for interjecting here, but am I correct? It's once there's a choice is made with a person suffering with HIV and their provider that a drug on the prior authorization list is not the one for them, they don't have to prove that it didn't work. They just have to petition and say, we want this other drug. Is that a nuance that's important, or maybe it's not even accurate?
So if the provider believes that the only medication that's appropriate for the client or patient is one of the ones that are on prior authorization, they can request a prior authorization and, provide the documentation of why the preferred medications are not clinically appropriate for that individual. And we'll review those on a case-by-case basis. So regardless of whether you've tried any other medication or not, you go through that process. So it could be a treatment naive person that has kidney disease. They would be allowed to try, one of the TAF products. That would be an approval criteria for one of the TAF products.
Okay, I must say, I think you can kind of get why some of us have used the shorthand of fail first. And laying it out differently has been helpful. Eric, does that answer your question? What Donna said?
I mean, thank you, Donna. I appreciate that, but I'm also confused because at the DUR meeting, I think it was, was that fall of 2019? Where it was specifically changed from fail twice to fail once. And that was the language used in that. I don't have my notes from that here, but that was part of that meeting, its recommendations and the change that was made. So that's where I'm kind of.
So Eric, that was included in the motion, but when we moved to the policy, the prior authorization policy, that fail first was removed. And that was in August of 2020, I believe. Is that what I said? Yeah, August 1st of 2020. So we removed that based on the feedback that we received at the DOR board meeting.
Okay, so I missed that entirely. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, and there will be some changes to this made in the report. Dale?
Well, if it's not a failed first, it's definitely a process first. Prior authorization is, which is a mental health piece of I failed at something because I didn't have equitable access like others that healthcare authority covers. I failed first because I failed to do something, and so I have to do this process.
Teresa.
I want to clarify a couple things. The preferred drug list is the list of medications that, as a provider, all I have to do is write the prescription. You go pick it up at the pharmacy. That's a preferred drug list. Those drugs are reviewed by the Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee and put on that list. If I instead need to treat a patient with a drug that is not on that list, my patient doesn't have to do anything. I have to say on that prescription, Mr. Smith has kidney failure. Therefore, the drugs on the preferred drug list will not be in his best interest. For that reason, I request drug that is not on the preferred drug list. I don't have to say anything about failing. I don't say anything about anything. I'm just saying I want to use this drug because that then goes in for review. That's the prior authorization, me explaining why the medications on that list aren't the right ones. So it's the patient doesn't have to do anything. I'm not going to tell the patient they failed because they haven't been on anything. So I want to just help people be clear in the words that you're using to us have very specific meanings. And I just want to make sure we're all understanding the way in which we're using the words so we're all understanding them the same way.
Teresa, I need one more clarification, and that is the difference between preferred drug list and the prior authorization list.
So if a drug requires prior authorization, it is not on the preferred drug list, which doesn't mean people don't have access to it. It just means
Teresa,
there
I
is a
just want
process.
to jump in
Yeah,
there. In
please.
general, some in other drug classes, we do have preferred drugs that do require prior authorization. So not every preferred drug is open access. I believe in the HIV class, if it's preferred, it doesn't require authorization.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
The preferred drug list is really the list of drugs. You guys, it's also referred to as a formulary, but Medicaid's not allowed to have a formulary. It has a specific meaning for Medicaid. So with the preferred drug list, everything is covered that has a rebate, but prior authorization is our way to manage utilization and steer towards the preferred drugs.
Okay, we've got Scott and Teresa with their hands up. And Scott, you may be muted.
Sorry. Double mute. I put it into chat what I believe the policy is, which is 121099, which changed, just like Donna and Teresa had said. And they are correct in that there is no technical fail first policy, but it is still a semantics issue and how utilization management protocols are played out, but through the prior authorization process. So while they did go from that change in July 2017 to 2018, there's still utilization management protocols that allow them to test the measures of how individuals can new to market drugs get on meds. So I think just to make sure that that is the policy.
And what I heard Dale's perspective was one that emphasized that for someone that it yes, it's more than a semantics issue as well, because it still may be a barrier. And Teresa and Donna pointed out how in some circumstances it may not be a barrier, but there's still another step, and that can be impactful to some individuals. And we have Manny, and then somebody else's hand was up. Manny.
I just want to also clarify, because this is a government agency that is going to present, we are a government agency that is going to present an official report to a legislature, that we are going to be using the actual definitions according to what the different agencies define those things. So please be clear with that, because internally here, we are going to be talking about issues, and we might say or call an issue whatever we feel it's more appropriate to call. But when we present the report, we need to do it with the definitions that every agency accepts for that particular issue. So please keep that in mind, because I don't want us to I don't want the work group to feel deceived if we present something with specific language that doesn't represent the depth of the conversation that we had here. So please keep that in mind. So one of the things that we discussed in the breakout session was to have a glossary for the report, so everybody understands when we talk about open access, it means this in this context. When we talk about equity, it means this. And when we talk about formulary, it means this. So keep that in mind, because I don't want our rich conversation to be, mixed up with the legal terminology that we have to use when we present the report. And that is not to dissuade any of us from engaging in conversations that call things by the way that we know they should be called, but we need to make the differentiation between, we will be working, we will have a different definition for our conversations here than the legal definitions that we have to use for the report. So keep that in mind.
I might also note we know, I mean, we've had 4 meetings with basically all the experts here and many of the people experiencing this here, and certainly not all of them. And still we've not had the words right. So that will be part of the report too, is that this process is extraordinarily complex for a layperson to understand, and that maybe that is in and of itself a barrier. Again, I can't thank you enough, folks, for all these nuggets that are kind of come raining down on us at the last meeting. This, in my experience, this is how it always happens. So now we have exactly a half an hour to go through the report. So we're going to do a hybrid of my 2 methods here. We're going to go through section by section, but I want you to only say the topmost thing, okay? Does anyone have a topmost thing to say about the first section, which is the summary? What needs to be in there? We've heard about the possibility of reordering the issues. Anything else? Don't have to say anything? Great, okay. Anybody have a topmost thing to say about the section that's titled About this report, about this input report? Okay, anyone have anything else to say about section 3, issues and options? We'll pull this one out a little bit. The first is the introductory piece, which spans pages 6 and 7. We've had some comments both here in the conversation today and some written comments from people about the way this competing frames for problems to be solved was written, and we knew it'd be a hot button for you, and sure enough, it's generated some good conversation. Any more good conversation to be had on section 3, issues and options, the first several paragraphs that talk about competing frames for problems to be solved?
Martha, this is Donna.
Dale, and then Dale was first, I'm afraid, and then Donna.
Yeah, I think this would be a great place to insert the update to modernization law and how that is impactful, that might be impacting, or it's not clear to the prosecuting attorneys and things on that line, how this could be a barrier to someone not receiving services if they can't get access to single dose regimen or things on that line. It should be at least considered. Thank you.
And Dale, would you say again the title of this, if you will?
It
the
would
update
be,
to the modernization laws.
Yeah, it'd be that we recommend maybe looking at the collaboration of the new law versus the new prior authorization or the cumbersomeness of it, because prosecuting attorneys or public health officials might not have that access to do prior auth in their public orders, mandates. If they order somebody to treatment and things in that line, that is not clear in this at all. It's not, and that's what this developed at the same time. Modernization law did pass at the same time this was coming about, so we're not clear on that.
Okay, thank you. Donna?
Hi, Martha. I was just going to say most of the comments I think we summarized already in this section, and we provided them in writing. So I was going to
Thank you
provide
so
them.
much. Really appreciate your care with that. Thank you. Anyone else have something to say about the first many paragraphs of the issues and options, competing frames for problems to be solved? Okay. Yes, Melanie. Hello, Melanie. Welcome back.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a little in and out. So I'm sorry if this was already discussed, but I think one of the things that might be really helpful would to say, you know, who's owning each frame a little bit more clearly, right? So I think that it's important to be able to say who is sharing those perspectives, so that that can give some more context both for the commissioners and ultimately the legislature. So that's just my idea.
Totally in line with what I said earlier, which you may have missed about. No, it's all good. That the framing of the frame as there's the government system and the community perspectives are those two frames really, and that should be clear.
Yeah.
And HCA has already made that request and gave us actual language for their perspective. So that is being integrated into the report. And yeah.
But not necessarily
thank you for taking the other side.
Yeah, not exactly. Yeah. So of course, one of the challenges of having authorship of this is to make those choices about how to attribute what's said. Okay. So issues and options versus recommendations. That's the section at the bottom of the second part of page 7, which is really about the first part of that is really about how we've gone about writing the report. It's really a process section as opposed to a substantive section. Eric, did you have something else to offer about that? Your hand is still raised.
No, something else around the
Sure.
recommendations. And I put this in the chat, but wanted to call it out that based on what Donna and Teresa were talking about, having the legal requirements that they are under, that are basically legislatively mandated, makes me think that we also need a review of those rules and policies and that legislation from an equity lens as part of this process. Because if those rules are a barrier to the HCA doing something that we're all thinking would be a good idea from the community perspective, then that could potentially be a legislative fix. But I think we need the sort of information. So a health equity review of and I don't know the right word, the legislation, the requirements, the laws, whatever it is that govern how the HCA operates. I think that would be a really good thing.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, now we're going into the issues, and there's already, I'll just note that there's already been a suggestion that issue 5 be rewritten to be more explicitly be about equity, and maybe it be bumped up. I'll just make a quick note that issues 1 and 2 were in there because they seem to more directly correspond to the questions in the budget proviso. But I think one of the things we've learned from these discussions is that this is bigger than the budget proviso. So we will be thinking about that. Does anyone have any comments on issue 1 and or the options that are offered there? Jonathan.
Yeah. Let's see. So I actually didn't understand what the first option meant alter and amend the current PA and petition system from a one-size-fits-all approach to one that allows for customization based on needs and circumstances. And I guess I'll add to that contributing to my misunderstanding is that the sort of sub points 1.1.1 and 1.1.2 to me didn't really flow from 1.1. I mean, I'll just to me that is what option 1.1 is on paper what we have now. The prior authorization system is intended to make it not a one size fits all. It just isn't an effective system.
Right. Yeah.
So that confused me. I guess if I were a legislator, I wouldn't be sure what to do with that option.
So you're right. That was born of my confusion as well. So what I'd love to know, Jonathan, is what do you think it should say instead?
I just wouldn't include that option.
Okay. Scott and then Donna.
Yeah, similarly on the one size fits all approach, right? It exactly what Jonathan said. It's a current prior authorization system. The one size fits all that you're assuming is renal failure or poorly controlled mental health concerns. So that isn't a one size fits all. In fact, it's actually very specific, and then it must be these two aspects for the prior authorization. I would say that some of the language in issue 1 itself is mostly right, but not entirely right. So when it says an individual can receive different ARV drugs, it's actually an individual patient may have access to varying antiretroviral drugs. And it goes back to the point that I think Donna had made is like, maybe we should probably universalize what the notion of access is, because prior authorization does give an undercurrent or opportunity for access, but it is still one additional hurdle in that respect. And then I would include in that issue 1, Medicare as well. For individuals who are on the Part D Medicare program, have the full complement of preferred drug lists that are preferred. And the same thing when you say the HC has a set of ARV drugs, it is like how Donna had said earlier, it's a PDL.
Okay, thank you. Donna and then Devin.
And to Scott's point, I was with the word access, we do provide access to all HIV medications. Some just require prior authorization. I wanted to point out, the Uniform Medical Plan for state employees also follows the same policy. And there are other payers that do have prior authorization now on some of the medications now that Truvada has gone generic. So to blanketly state that no other commercial plan is doing this, I think is just an inaccurate statement.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Scott, do you have more to say, or can you lower your hand? And okay, we'll move on to Devin. Thank you so much, Devin and Donna and Scott. Devin.
Thanks, Martha. I guess I'd like to point out just the header generally for issue 1 and the word disputed. Maybe there's a more accurate way to kind of summarize that. If 100 people and the majority of the evidence says one thing and one person and some evidence says another, I don't know if that's a dispute. So that's kind of an issue that needs to be
Tell me what
unpacked
you'd
when
say
this report
instead.
runs out.
This is facilitator speak for not attributing.
I don't necessarily have the answer, but I don't think that properly lays this out. So.
Well, I put it out to all of you. I would welcome, this is the facilitator's dilemma, a more accurate way to capture the nugget of this very real and discussion that you all have had about, is it good to have open access? Is it bad to have open access? So Anything else on issue 1? Carrie. And Devin, not to say that what you're saying isn't true. It is true. Dispute is a tough word there, right? Thank you. Carrie.
I just would also consider adding a third frame around this again, the innovations coming to the drug class. I think that hasn't been discussed much, but I think it is maybe a bigger part of the conversation ahead, and maybe a bigger factor than we've really considered in this group.
Can you give me the headline for that?
Like how you would title the framing
when you say drug, yeah, or when you say drug classes. What? Give me a few more words with it here.
I might say something like, there are new options on the horizon that should be considered, and how these decisions could affect it. I don't know. I don't have the right words either. I need more coffee, I think, or maybe less.
We all do.
If other people have ideas, though, please chime in.
Maybe something about, that whatever recommendations we make or processes we put into place now have to be adaptable and flexible enough for future meds as they come online. I mean, that's a long title, but that's I think what you're saying, if I'm interpreting right.
Yeah. I think it might maybe kind of somewhat twofold. One is being mindful of what you're saying, Eric, and then the other is being careful that we don't put something in place today that we get locked into some commitment of purchasing that we can't negotiate. I mean, if something new comes along, we could get stuck paying whatever is decided. And then that creates a whole nother set of access. And that, DOH doesn't want to get in a situation where we're having to pick up more too. So.
Carrie, I'm going to ask questions clearly from a neophyte here. Are we talking about the possibility that in the future there might be, say, a single injection drug?
Yeah. Oh, that's on its way,
okay.
So that will be the next thing looked at. So how much we do today could affect what that does for us in a couple months.
Okay. All right. Anything else to be said about it, Scott, issue 1, and then we're going to zoom through on 2 through 6.
Yeah, last one where the summary report says many on the work group suggest there are other barriers to effective treatment. I don't think it's a suggestion to say that a prior authorization isn't a barrier, as it is a utilization means test. So I would say that should be taken out. I would say many on the work group and community understand many on the work group and the community face barriers to effective treatment that should be addressed.
Okay, that's the bottom paragraph on page 8.
Please.
So you're asserting that just the fact of requiring a PA or that's not the right term. We're going to do a glossary, right? The fact of needing to petition out of something that's already on the list, there's no question that's a barrier.
Correct.
Even though I will point out, we've had quite a bit of discussion here about whether or not it's people have disputed whether or not it's a real barrier, and people who are experiencing or living with HIV says it is a barrier. Some of the providers have said, we need you to know, because some of them aren't here today, have said it's not a barrier. So we know how to deal with this. Not all the providers have said that, but I just want you to know we want to capture the fullness of that conversation without minimizing the impact through the equity lens. I didn't say that right. Without minimizing the impact or forgetting the equity lens. Okay.
Correct.
All right, let's move to issue 2. Actual costs need to be comprehensively analyzed and understood. This is on page 10. Donna.
Sorry, can't get myself off mute. I was just kind of thinking about what Scott had just said, and I apologize, I'm taking us backwards, but I understood this comment to say that the work group recognizes there are other barriers in addition to the prior authorization, and that some believe that removing prior authorization is being touted as, what you say, a panacea, that it's going to solve the world's problems, and that's not the case. I thought that's what that paragraph was trying to say.
Well, I can certainly change the word from other to additional.
But maybe instead of the word suggest, you say many of the work group members recognize there are other barriers to effective treatment that should be addressed. And correct.
Okay, thank you. I hear some nodding. I hear some nodding. Got cricks in our neck. Okay, issue 2. Actual costs need to be comprehensively analyzed and understood. Jonathan.
Yeah, this comment applies to that issue. And actually, looking at the report, I see that it also applies to some of the later points of issue 1, because there's a lot of language there about additional study that may need to be done. I think reading that part, I guess I was thinking from the perspective of a legislator. What I would recommend if I were, King, would be, yes, do additional study, but the policy shouldn't remain in place while that study is being done. I think there's an important timing recommendation to be made there about, is the point, yes, additional study needs to be done, and we can't move forward any which way until that information is gathered, or more study needs to be done, which means we really don't have the information we need to have this policy in place. If this were a legal case, it might be a recommendation for an injunction on the policy. I also think along with that, legislators need to understand that this isn't opening access to the formulary, or we don't have a formulary, open access to this class of drugs, I guess you would say, is not a new policy. It's a return to an old policy. So, and I think that's important to understand in deciding to fall back to an old position while you gather more information. So sorry, I don't know exactly how to wordsmith that, and I don't envy you. That's my input.
It's okay to not wordsmith, believe me, but I will ask you for one clarification. Once again, you've said this policy, and I want to know, when you say this policy, what you are speaking of, just to make sure I get it right.
Requiring prior authorization for many of the HIV treatment medications available.
Okay, thank you. I thought that's what you meant, but I just want to make sure I knew. Other comments on section 2, and that whole question of, are we going to study more before we take action, is always an important one, and one you folks have been bringing up from the very start. Other comments on section 2, issue 2, I'm sorry.
Dale has his hand up.
Okay,
Dale.
Please, Dale. Sorry, I missed you.
Yeah, just quickly about the cost analysis, it's ever flowing, and I think we should recommend that, because it's an aging population, and to do a really strategic cost analysis, we need to know how many people that have had HIV, that have maybe died in the last year. So we have an elderly population going, and how many are actually dying, maybe not from HIV, but off the system, to the cost analysis of what the system is. And that hasn't been addressed, even looked at to the total cost. And that's even like with what goes from, preferred drug to a generic drug, and that cost, and that 7-year gap in between those. So that analysis.
Okay, Thank you. Donna, Carrie, and Dale. Okay, Donna.
So Martha, I think we need to figure out, I don't understand what life cycle costs mean. And there was another place I thought where life cycle management was mentioned, and I didn't understand what that meant.
Okay, I'll tell you what I meant, and I borrowed it from my experience working in the environmental sector, which is sometimes it's called cradle to grave cost analysis, or it's done with carbon. It's like looking at the whole cost of, anyway. So if there's a better term to use for looking more broadly at cost than the term life cycle cost, I'd love to know what that is. I think some of you use the term life cycle cost, but maybe I just imagined that. Anybody have a suggestion for me?
Just quickly, I had used that in one of the town halls because that was brought to you know, a question that I took from a legislator, you know, about the cost of my life over the duration, that they were using that as a lifetime cost of an HIV positive person. So there's, you know, I mean, is it official, you know, somewhere that's a term? I don't know, but
so
I've used
Martha, I would suggest that we use that phrase during the cycle of use or something like that, because it might not refer to people using it from birth because they are infected with HIV from birth.
Yeah.
It might be that they become, so the life cycle might not be the most appropriate, but the cycle of their use of the medication or something along the lines.
Or cycle of there. Yeah, okay, got it. Carrie, thank you.
Oh goodness, I have to remember what I was gonna say now. I saw in here too, there was a reference to questions about the estimate of Healthcare Authority on the potential cost impact. We in OID have been doing an analysis on how many people from our ADAP program have switched to, I'm just gonna say Biktarvy, that's been the biggest question here. And so we're gonna be providing data back out about that. And I would say, based on our initial early analysis, Healthcare Authority's estimates are low compared to our actual evidence. So that we hope to have in the next couple of days, we'll get over. But I just wanted to point that out, that we have some data. If that's of interest, we'll be sharing it. And
Well, thank you for that. There was certainly a point of intense discussion were those numbers used. Yeah. So thank you for noting that there'll be more and better numbers soon. Just not in time for this report. Carrie?
I just want to offer one more thing too, or maybe it's a question. I think it would be, I put this in the chat, I just didn't hear us talk about it, is if you can include some explanation to how manufacturers were added as stakeholders, since they weren't listed in the proviso list of stakeholders. I just think that might help do some framing too to the conversation. And I think I heard that early on that the manufacturers would be providing data to support. So I'm wondering if you could give an update on what that means or where we are with that. Or that's just my understanding. Anyway, throwing that all out. Thanks.
Well, I will point out there's quite a bit on the website that was provided by some of the manufacturers. I mean, it takes some combing through, but yeah. Okay, other comments on issue 2 or options to address issue 2? Okay, 3. And we're going to take just 5 more minutes here, and then Manny, it will be your show at 10 minutes to noon. Okay, we've had quite a few discussions today clarifying and refuting the non-specific use of the term fail first. But right now, issue 3 is written, the fail first system may create obstacles that have implications for individual and for both individual and public health. Any comments on issue 3? Okay, issue 4, lift the veil on drug pricing, drug costs, and the role of rebates. This is one of those issues that we knew was beyond maybe even the ability of the legislature to do anything about, but certainly came up over and over and over again. Carrie and then Eric.
Sorry, I tried to lower and re-raise my hand to the impacts on public health first, if I could just start there. I did see references to the NDAIDS Washington report and recommendations through this report too. And I don't think we've talked about that at all in this conversation. And so it seems sort of like it's sitting there, but really no context around it unless I missed something, but I don't think we've really dug into that. And other than to say, we are expecting to release a report by the end of the year about, how far we have come. I don't recall us being in a conversation in this group, like specific to that topic. So it seems a little like an outlier.
Okay, so Carrie, 2 things. You were cutting in and out a little bit. Did you say you were issuing that DOH is going to issue a report on this by the end of the year?
Yep.
Oh, okay. All right. And I believe it was brought up in town halls or maybe also by Renee. And so this also includes conversations from the town halls, so that it may feel like an outlier in that it didn't come up a lot in this work group, but it did come up in town hall meetings.
And with the health policy advisors of the governor's office as well.
Yeah, I'm just, maybe we could do a follow-up with the Department of Health on kind of the next round we're heading towards, or what the future looks like, because I think that's maybe a missing context then is what next. And I think that's maybe what people are wondering. Well, that passed, so now what are we going to do about that? We aren't done.
Okay, good.
I don't think that's spelled out anywhere here, and we might be able to offer some, talking points around that or key messages.
Okay, well, and also to make it so it's not just, like you said, not just hanging out there like, blah, it's not been, especially since you are doing that review. That's terrific. Okay, Eric.
Yeah, just to comment on what Carrie just said, I think it came up in one of the first meetings that this work group had too, as concern on the part of community that these policies aren't in alignment with the goals to end AIDS, and then pointed out that the End AIDS initiative was actually done, and then concern about what's next. So that's sort of the context, is how does this fit with achieving those goals?
Yeah, but also, it's also important to note that this project did not just appear out of nowhere, and that End AIDS 2020, that this is 2021, and we still have some unfinished things on the agenda. And that was something that people have brought up in the very first work group and subsequently as well. It's not about an analysis of End AIDS 2020 so much as it is saying that we had some unfinished work, and we have to frame this report within the context of work that has been done over the past decade.
Okay, thank you. Issue 4, we're getting right through here.
On issue 4, particularly in relation to the option that I think what's coming up for me from the conversation today is that we really don't have a broad enough understanding of what is within our area of influence in the state and what is federally mandated, right? And so I think I mentioned that earlier, but I think this is another spot where that could be clear. So there are federal mandates, but there's state mandates also. And so where is it within the state mandates that we have influence on this particular issue? Thanks.
Okay, and Donna?
Hi, so I just wanted to, point out that, the Healthcare Authority fully supports improving transparency in this space around cost and prices. Manufacturers get to set their own price. There is no price regulation in our country. So there are federal rules that do dictate, what we have to cover. And it also, that's where under federal law protects the disclosure of these prices. So that really requires federal change. But it does trickle down into our state supplemental rebates. So because the supplemental rebates are usually net of the federal rebate, that prohibits us from disclosing those as well. I would love to show you what the prices are, but I don't want to, be breaking the law.
Okay, and anybody who's been following the national news notes that there's been a lot of discussion about this at the national level right now, and it's changing every day. Issue 5. This was the equity. We'll probably reframe this as an equity issue. Anything else to say about this? It's been discussed a fair bit already. Not meaning there isn't more to say. Jonathan.
It might be valuable to add in there that Washington State, well, I guess to identify, to flag for legislators that there are at least 2 places where a more rigorous analysis of the equity impacts of HCA policy on HIV treatment medications could come from. One is the new Office of Equity, which was, brought into existence, I believe, last year for exactly this reason, to do exactly this kind of work, look at state policies and understand disparate impacts. The other, and this can only happen if, my understanding is this can only happen if a bill is introduced in the legislature, but there's the Board of Public Health can provide a public health impact report, which looks at things like upstream costs and disparities. So I think those are two specific recommendations for how we could get more information, how we could attend more to those on the margins. I think is something like the language in the report right now.
Okay, great. Issue 6. Well, we've talked about this a little bit already. Okay, I am going to turn it over to Manny. And before I do that, I'm going to say thank you, because these are my last words. These are the last words from me here. And I am confident that because of today's meeting and the things that you all have sent us and that you will send us in the next day or two, this will be a stronger, more complete report. And you have my heartfelt thanks for that. Manny.
Well, folk, I do want to say a couple of things. One, when we were planning for today's meeting, one of the ideas that we had was for me to share with you some of the ideas that I was leaning towards presenting as part of the LGBTQ Commission's report, and to do that early in the meeting so we could take that as the starting point. However, that idea came up before we got some feedback on this final draft. And then we realized that we needed to engage in more conversation to clarify more things, so we were not steering the conversation sideways and placing our ideas before the ideas of the work group. So, and then we came up with the idea this morning before the meeting, well, why not share those, those ideas towards the end of today's meeting? But one thing that I realized as we were talking and discussing these issues is that I'm going to need a few more days or a few more hours, because I don't have a few more days, a few more hours to go over the revisions, the ideas that you have presented. So I will not be sharing with you right now any any final decisions or anything like that, because there are none right now. You have provided a lot of great information. I am not an expert on HIV, or my only activism within HIV access or prevention for HIV and access to medication, all that was back in college. So that's 20 years ago. So I've learned a lot from all of you. I've learned a lot from my colleagues on the DOH and the HCA and other state agencies. I have learned a lot from my colleagues on the HIV service organizations, and I have learned a lot from our friends and colleagues who are currently living with HIV and thriving in spite of HIV. So thank you so much for sharing with us your knowledge, your wisdom. One thing that I shared from the beginning, with especially with groups of activists, was that I am not perfect. I cannot understand every single idea and every single reality. I try to do my best. So I know that perhaps the final report might not be what we originally wanted to present. It might not be completely what we had in mind that we were going to present. It might change. And I want you to understand that this is not based on any bad feedback or any anything bad. This is only to comply with the report that we need to present, to comply with the framework that we need to present this within, and all that. So it has nothing to do with the work that you have done. It has to do with the parameters that we have in order to present the report. The other thing that we were talking about this morning, and that Renee actually framed very, very well, and I wanted to make sure that you understood, is that the work of this work group doesn't end today. We said this before. Some of you have been involved in this for 40 plus years, since HIV came to light. And we know that it's not the end. All the things that we have learned here, we can take back to our communities, to our agencies, to our partners, and continue educating, continue advocating. We already know that there's a lot of activism that needs to happen at the federal level with our 2 senators, our congressional delegation, to make sure that they understand the things that need to happen at the federal level, the changes that need to happen at the federal level, so we can have more access for medication in all of the states and the territories. So keep that in mind. What we have learned here, what we have gathered here, doesn't stay here and goes to a legislature only. This goes back with us to our communities and to the work that we do. So with that, I want to thank each and every one of you and all of the people who were able to join us on the town halls. It is a lot of work. It is a lot of your time that we took to do this. When Carrie Morris called me with this idea, I had no idea what I was saying yes to. So thank you, Carrie. But I am really glad that we did. I am really glad that we engaged in this conversation. I'm really glad that we continue to learn from each other and to support each other, and to make sure that our communities have the equitable access to the support that they need to thrive as Washingtonians. So this was a very tiny piece of the whole puzzle. Medicare patients living with HIV, that's a very tiny piece of the puzzle, but it's so, so important, because without it, the puzzle is not complete. So thank you so much for all the work that you have done. I also want to shout out to Melanie and Carrie, who helped me from the beginning when I had no idea what they meant by the budget proviso, and helped me define everything. I also want to thank Martha and Renee for their excellent work facilitating and drafting and reaching out to people. They have spent a lot of hours, so much more than what they originally thought that they were going to be spending, and so much more than that we had to make another budget proviso to make sure that we pay accordingly to the work that they have done. So if you pray for that it gets approved. If you send good juju, do it, because we need more money. And then the other thing that I want to say, just to give a shout out to my colleague here, Eric, because this is her last week with PCAF, and she's been serving there for a long time, for some time, and serving our community, and being here from Tacoma and having worked with her very closely. I just want to recognize that. And to Omar, who was our program manager before, and to Tracy, who picked up immediately, so much so that we had to do some internal stuff here, so I didn't lose one without having him train Tracy on this particular work. So thank you so much, Tracy, for all the work that you have done. And to the commissioners, Maroon and Sawyer, thank you so much for being here, for being a sounding board for the commission, and for giving us your expert, advice and guidance. So, and obviously my colleagues from DOH and HCA, thank you so much for your commitment to serving the people of Washington, for being here as listening to our community. So with that, honestly, gracias. We couldn't have done it without you. And we know that this is not the end. We know that we haven't solved all of the issues. We know that this is just one more step towards equitable access to HIV medication for the people that need it most. And with that, I think that we're done. It is time. So thank you so much. Remember that you have until end of day, 5 p.m. on Wednesday to send any final substantial comments and additions or edits to the report. You will receive the summary report that we will send to a legislature Friday or Saturday, and with information on where you can take the next step and who to contact with any feedback or any comments on that final report. So with that, thank you so much. I hope that we continue working together and in some other ways. And here at the Commission, we are, to serve the people of Washington, especially the LGBTQ community. So please feel free to reach out if you need anything on any other issue that affects our community.